All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Mr. Anderson, and we are breaking out of this matrix one step at a time. Here we go with Heliocentrism and the Luciferian Scientific Dictatorship, Part 7. I'm not going to read all that crazy subtitle because that's too much, and I've already did all that in Part 1. So right off the bat, we got Jean Desagulers. I don't really know how to speak French, so I'm just going to call them Desagires because I'm uncultured like that. Dr. Desagires, Grand Master, 1719. The earliest reference to speculative masonry known to us occurs in the second edition of Preston's Illustrations of Masonry, published in 1775. Masonry passes and is understood under two denominations. It is operative and it is speculative. Between the operative masonry of circa 1600 and the speculative masonry of circa 1800, there is a gap of some 200 years, and the problem of how it was filled remains. One possibility is that the operative masonry of the early 17th century continued practically unchanged until the early 18th, and that it was then suddenly transformed by Desagires, Anderson, and the prominent masons of the newly formed Grand Lodge in London. We have to thank Brother H. Hallett for drawing our attention to this reference. We have since discovered that is mentioned in Benjamin Freemery. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not going to try. Excuse me. And Shaolin 391 have been the view held by Murray Lyon, who describes Desagires as, quote, the co-fabricator and pioneer of English symbolical Freemasonry or Masonry. And you can see the logos there. We're not going to go on a deep dive off Masonry or any of that in the logos. As you can see here, you do have the typical dome representing the macrocosm outside, where we've got a dome and the pillars holding it up. The temple with the checkered floor being a microcosm of the earth. So this is the earth right here with that eye in the sky. You are the eye in the sky. And that's not how it goes. I'm not good with lyrics. So this is the Royal Society. Like I said, we're continuing with Royal Society. And as it says here, a portrait group of some of the most distinguished fellows. So basically, this is your snapshot of the Special Boys. To the right here, this very fugly guy with his hands out like a square. That's Richard Owen. That's the guy who would invent dinosaurs. But we'll get to that in a little bit in another part, probably in a few parts from now, part 8 or 9 or something like that. But we also have Francis Galton. We've got his cousin, Charles Darwin. Francis Galton, of course, the one who invented modern-day eugenics with the impetus provided by his cousin Darwin. So this is all Royal Society members. Just a second while I cough real quick. All right, sorry about that. So basically, in a nutshell, here's your Special Boys, and we'll continue with this Royal Society. Because also in here is Huxley, like the guy in the center to the left. We got Huxley, History of the Royal Society of London. So, Newton was educated at Cambridge and elected in 1672 to the Royal Society. During this time, he was intimate with a young French Protestant refugee, Jean Desagulers. So let me say that again. He was intimate with a young French Protestant refugee. How many of you have been intimate with a young French boy? So let me continue. Also an alchemist and one of the Royal Society's two curators of experiments. So close was their friendship that according to the Encyclopedia Freemasonry, Newton stood godfather to Dr. Desagires' daughter. So this is like, remember when JFK moved his little boyfriend into the White House? That's getting sidetracked. In the years that followed, Desagires became one of the leading figures in the astonishing proliferation of English Freemasonry throughout Europe. He was also instrumental in initiating into Freemasonry the Duke of Lorraine, a Merovingian whose younger brother would become a future Grand Master of the Prior Scion in the continent. Okay, you see the Baphomet logo. Just a second. All right. Mackey's Encyclopedia. The Royal Society was the apple of Newton's eye. Newton, in turn, was the leader, inspiration, and glory of the Royal Society, and the membership of the Royal Society was wholly Masonic. Newton was therefore in a Masonic circle, end quote. Like the Masons, he ascribed great significance to the configuration and dimensions of Solomon's temple. The dimensions and configuration of the temple he believed to conceal the alchemical formulas, and he believed the ancient ceremonies in the temple to have involved alchemical processes. Okay? Voltaire was introduced to Newton when he met members of Science Royal Society. He attended Newton's funeral a year later. They're all in the same clique. They're all in the same groups here. And you can belong to more than one group. You can be a Freemason and a Jesuit and this and that, even though they play their political games, but that's a whole nother thing. So Ben Franklin, of course, got his award from the Royal Society for discovering that lightning and electricity were the same. Oh my God, what a novel idea. So this is a picture right here in the center top of the award that Franklin got from the Royal Society. So in 1756, he was inducted into the Royal Society in absentia. And of course, we got John Locke, who took Hindu. So I'm going off track here a little bit, and then I'm coming right back, because this stuff's all intertwined. This evolution, eugenics, all of these things are intertwined, coming from these royal societies and secret societies. So John Locke took Hindu reincarnation brought from India by the East India Trading Company and made evolution theories, right? So here's briefly about spontaneous generation. And before I go too off on a tangent, we're going to bring it back. But, quote, to bring about spontaneous generation would be to create a germ. It would be creating life. It would be to solve the problem of its origin. It would mean to go from matter to life through the conditions of environment and of matter, aka lifeless material. God, as author of life, would then no longer be needed. Matter would replace him. God would need to be invoked only as the author of the motions of the universe. So someone who set it into motion. Almost like a grand architect thing. Almost like what the Freemasons say. And I'm just going in because we're starting with the Royal Society and going into the power structure of the Catholics. Which could be its own 50-hour stream or whatever about the Catholics. But we'll reel it in here. Trust me on that. Evolution in the neo-Darwinian sense is no longer a mere hypothesis. So the cult continues. And when I say the cult, I speak fundamentally. For example, Freemasonry at the core is Kabbalah. There might be someone else who's not even a Freemason who is a Kabbalist. And I'm saying they're in the same cult. Because that's how I see shit. I look at the fundamentals. Scientific. This is Bertrand Russell, by the way. Scientific societies are yet in their infancy. It may be worthwhile to spend a few moments in speculating as to possible future developments of those that are oligarchies. It is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments much more control over individual mentality than they now have, even in totalitarian countries. Fitch laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than their schoolmasters would have wished. But in his day, this was an unattainable ideal. What he regarded as the best system in existence produced Karl Marx. In future, such failures are not likely to occur where there is dictatorship. Diet, injections, and injunctions will combine from an early age to produce the sort of character and sort of beliefs that the authorities consider desirable, and any serious criticism of the powers that be will become psychologically impossible. Even if all are miserable, they will all believe themselves happy because the government will tell them they are so. Okay. The Darwin Project. In the article Towards a New Science of Life, EIR journalist Jonathan Tenenbaum makes the following statement concerning Darwinism, quote, "Now it is easy to show that Darwinism, one of the pillars of modern biology, is nothing but a kind of cult, a cult religion. I'm not exaggerating. It has no scientific validity whatsoever. Darwin's so-called theory of evolution is based on absurdly irrational propositions, which did not come from scientific observations, but were artificially introduced from the outside for political ideological reasons." This Ferraris guy who puts together these Prompta Biblicatha, I'm not going to pretend that I can pronounce this stuff correctly. Kanakana, Juridica, all this stuff. So this is the title page here. So this guy puts out these releases, right? And then the Jesuits actually edit these releases. Okay, so here's a few quotes. And there's a reason why I'm going into the Catholic Church and the Jesuits like this, because these people have a lot to do with the Heliocentrism. They invented Big Bang and all this stuff. So it's going to have a lot to do with it. So, quote, "The Pope is of so great dignity and so exalted that he is not a mere man, but as it were God and the vicar of God," end quote. Quote, "Hence the Pope is crowned with a triple crown as King of Heaven and of earth and of the lower regions," end quote. Quote, "So that if it were possible that the angels might err in the faith, or might think contrary to the faith, they can be judged and excommunicated by the Pope," end quote. So this Pope can correct these angels and put angels in their place. Are you fucking crazy? How dumb can you be to give this man this level of power? Are you fucking dumb? So, quote, "The Pope is, as it were, God on earth, sole sovereign of the faithful of Christ, chief King of kings, having plenitude of powers, to whom has been exhausted by the omnipotent God's direction, not only of the earthly, but also of the heavenly kingdom." See the theme? This man has power outside of earth. Are you nuts? Quote, "The Pope can modify divine law, and since his powers are not of man, but of God," end quote. I don't need to go off about the Pope, because, I mean, come on. Lucius Ferraris, 18th century canonist of the Franciscan order. Okay, so this is the guy doing this document, right? Now, I put this on here to show, down here, let's see. A new edition was published at Rome in 1899 at the Press of the Propaganda in 8 volumes, with a volume of supplements edited by the Jesuit Buceroni, containing several dissertations and the recent and important documents of the Holy See. So Jesuits are editing this stuff. The Jesuits say that he's a God on earth. Fuck the Jesuits. Here's Ignatius that we've all heard about. We all heard the word Ignatius. We've all heard the Jesuits. It's the Jesuits, man. We've all heard that. We've heard people name the Jesuits because they are a very, very, very fundamentally, they're basically the actual infrastructure. So they are very powerful. They're like hidden in plain sight. So they are like the mechanism in place. Like they did set up quote unquote scientific schools in all these countries and take over countries and all this stuff. So they were like the bagmen, I guess you could say. But it doesn't end there. It's not just the Jesuits. 1545 to 1563. And again, if your favorite little YouTuber wants to tell you that it's just the Jesuits, go ahead. 1545 to 1563. Council of Trent's Counter-Reformation, formed by a commission of cardinals put together to re-establish Catholic authority. Society of Jesus, aka Jesuits, IHS, is empowered. Ignatius Loyola was the founder. Sitting in the hospital And I will detour just for a second here with a few slides from my, because this slide is from my school's presentation. Because like I said, there's so many rabbit holes that are all worked in together that I have to just briefly address it, and then maybe on a future thing I'll do an all Jesuit stream or something like that. But sitting in the hospital, he started reading about the Catholic saints, particularly Saint Francis of Assisi. That's significant. And he's set to become just like him. He viewed Jesus as a military commander to conquer the world. Now, he did dedicate his life's work to Asherah and prayed to her for 3 days and all that kind of stuff. But I find this interesting about St. Francis because this St. Francis character, all these fundamental cults are all linked together. So like the Theosophist cult. The Theosophist cult believes in the ascended masters, and St. Francis is one of them. What a coincidence. So, St. Francis of Assisi, founder of the Franciscan Order of the Friars Minor, and then also of a woman's order and a St. Clare order. 1979, Pope John Paul has recognized him as the patron saint of ecology. So this guy is backing up evolution, and he's backing up St. Francis. Let's see, St. Francis is the patron saint of the UN. Okay? So, this is just one brief thing, just to give you an idea of theosophy and why I brought it up. Because we're actually talking about Catholics right now, right? So, the UN, let's see what it said. So, St. Francis is the patron saint of the UN, right? That's why they went and signed the UN Charter in San Francisco, because San Francisco means Sir Francis. It's a ritualistic thing, right? So 1945, representatives from 50 countries met in San Francisco, aka Sir Francis, at the United Nations Conference to draw up the charter and sign it. So they ritualistically did their charter in a place called Sir Francis. So look at these theosophists. This is just a quick story from Alice Bailey. Because I had to touch on theosophy when I did the whole schools presentation, because schools are an utter wash with theosophy. So June 30th, 1895, at 15, she supposedly was visited by a stranger who told her she needed to practice self-control in preparation for a certain work that was planned for her to do. She initially thought it was Jesus, but later decided to be Kuthumi. After she visited the Theosophical building and saw a painting of him on the wall, Theosophists believed that his earlier incarnation was Pythagoras and another earlier incarnation of Saint Francis of Assisi. So we have a direct Kabbalistic cult connecting Pythagoras and Saint Francis. This has been the theme the whole time. Why do they have Pythagoras Freemason lodges? And I know we detoured and we're coming back here. In 1491, San Ignacio de Loyola was born in the Basque province of the, Guipuzcoa? I'm not going to pretend I'm pronouncing it right. Spain. His parents were Marranos, and at the time of his birth, the family were very wealthy. As a young man, he became a member of the Jewish Illuminati order in Spain. As a cover for his crypto-Jewish activities, he became very active as a Roman Catholic. Alright, RIP my channel, I know. On May 20th, 1521, Ignatius, as he was now called, was wounded in a battle, and he became a semi-cripple. Unable to succeed in the military and political arena, he started a quest for his holiness, and it eventually ended up in Paris, where he studied for the priesthood. At Loyola's death in 1556, there were more than 1,000 members in the Jesuit order located in a number of nations. Alright. Ignatius of Loyola was the leader of a secret occult organization known as the Alumbrados, Spanish for Illuminati. On August 15th, 1534, Loyola started a sister organization to the Alumbrados, which he called the Society of Jesus. It is more commonly known today as the Jesuits. Loyola was arrested by the Dominican Order of Catholic Inquisitors, who were concerned with his growing influence and power. Okay. The first known... Just a second. Nice, sorry about that. The first known Illuminati order, Alumbrado, was founded in 1492 by Spanish Jays called Marranos. They were also known as Crypto Jays. Publicly, they were now Roman Catholics. But it's the Jesuits! It's the Catholics! But secretly, they practiced Judaism, including following the Talmud and the Kabbalah. But it's the Jesuits! The Marranos were able to teach their children secretly about Judaism, but in particular the Talmud and the Kabbalah, and this huge group of Jays survived to this very day. Okay, so I was in a used bookstore. This guy was running a used bookstore out of his house. He turned his whole house into a used bookstore, but he had that rare 14th edition Britannica that cost like $5,000 or whatever because of all the people that they brought in to write it and all that stuff. I'm not going to read this whole thing about Illuminati, but what I found interesting, they're talking about Joan of Arc here, Emanuel Swedenborg, which we've all heard about. Let's see. Both who believed they were in regular communication with and directed by intelligences from the heaven world. In 1490, a reference is found of them under the title of Illuminados. In 1511, the Spanish Inquisition considered a case of a woman of this order who claimed she held conversations with the Virgin Mary. So like I was saying, the Virgin Mary, and if you watch the beginning of this series and some of my other series, the Virgin Mary in the Catholic Church is Asherah. That is Semiramis, a.k.a. Astarte, a.k.a. Columbia for the Americas, a.k.a. Bavaria for the German area, a.k.a. Isis. It's the same deity. It's the Queen of Heaven, okay? Babylon. So let me move on. Speaking of that, who is the Black Madonna, Our Lady of Montserrat? Everything about the Montserrat version. So, historical characters that prayed to the Montserrat Black Madonna. The most famous saint to have worshipped the black version of Montserrat is Saint Ignatius of Loyola. He is said to have prayed there for 3 days, then revealed to his confessor at the monastery that he had the intention to abandon his military career and offered her sword to the Black Madonna. So, this man is praying to Asherah. This man is praying to Semiramis, the Queen of Babylon, and dedicating himself to her. This is not a Christian. Okay. Without the battles fought and won in the cave of Manresa, Ignatius could not have begun writing his spiritual exercises, which we'll go into in the next thing because we're about to wrap this thing up soon. Ignatius had visions of the serpent early in his spiritual life, but before he had any heavenly ecstasies. Day had settled into night, wiping away the slightest ray of light entering his room at the hospital of Manresa. See, it's so religious, even when they say that. The slightest ray of light entering his room. Goodness. When Ignatius saw a figure, glowing and almost incandescent, it boldly intruded into his thoughts and prayers. Strain as he might, he could not recognize the figure. It was hard to identify. It was so blurred, all he could do was make out that it was dimly resembled a serpent. As he was almost hypnotized by the sight, suddenly blinding lights shot forth. It's always light, too. Blinding lights shot forth from what has appeared to be many eyes on the form. Then it would leave. The image would return over and over again. This dude had a little serpent buddy in his fucking hospital room. This is insane. Ignatius began to look forward to its next appearance. I can't wait to see this serpent again. Feeling an unexplainable attraction towards it. But the Lord, what do you mean by Lord? Do you mean the word bow? But the Lord is always balancing the odds, always providing us with the ammunition to fight the attacks of the devil. That's some sociopathic shit right there. That was written by an insane person. And I know some of the people watching this are religious and stuff like that. I'm generally not religious. So when I see that, I see a psychopath. I don't know about you. Ignatius would later in life write that while he was immersed in ecstasy, God infused him with such knowledge and enlightenment. Which God? You mean that glowing serpent with eyes? Is that the Christian God? So God infused him with such knowledge and enlightenment that if he were to add all he had received in his entire life, it would not equal what he learned in that one moment. He had that touch from Lucifer. He had that Promethean moment. When he came out of the ecstasy, he ran to the cross, in front of which he had always prayed. Okay. Here's the Black Virgin of Montserrat that he was praying to. Here's the caves in Manresa that crazy ass bastard was going into. Okay? Torturing himself. He was in these caves torturing himself until he's seen visions and stuff. That's how he got those spiritual exercises that these dumbasses are doing. Because some crazy ass son of a bitch was in this mountain region right here torturing himself. And here you are, however many years later. I mean, don't get me started. Here's the Black Virgin of Montserrat again. And we're almost done here. Ignatius of Loyola's secretary, Polanco, was of Jewish descent and was the only person present at his deathbed. Loyola himself was a crypto J of the occult Kabbalah. A crypto J is a J who converts to another religion and outwardly embraces the new religion while secretly maintaining Jewish practices. And here we are at the end. James Linetz, who succeeded Ignatius Loyola, the second Jesuit general, right? The fourth Jesuit general, a Belgian named Eberhard Mercurian or whatever. We've got Francisco Ribera, Emmanuel Lacunza, during the fifth general congregation in 1593. Of the 27 Jesuits who proposed changes to the Constitution, 25 were either Jewish or Moorish descent. And we will leave it at that. Yeah. So we'll leave it at that for part 7 and come back in part 8 where we'll continue on these spiritual exercises and stuff with these Jesuits. But this isn't going to turn into a 10 different parts of the Jesuits, because that you could easily do that. That would have to be its own thing, its own series about the Jesuits. So I'm not going there. So we'll wrap up with the Jesuits in the next one. And then thank you guys for checking it out. Appreciate it. Share it and all that kind of stuff if you find value in it. Thank you.